We've got Councilmember Katherine Gilmore Richardson. Just give a little wave when we shout you out here, from Philadelphia City Council. Register of Wills Tracey Gordon from the City of Philadelphia. Hello, Madam Register. Commissioner Jim Leonard from the Records Department at the city. Hello, Commissioner. Michael Froelich from the Community Legal Services, and Kelly Gasly from Philadelphia VIP. So with great honor, pass it over to Estelle Richmond, Distinguished Advisor to the Pew Charitable Trust. Take it away, Estelle.
Thank you, Sophie, and it's a pleasure to welcome everyone to this group convening. And thank you to all, particularly to all of the panel members for agreeing to participate today. We're just grateful to all of you for making time and for all the work you do. And a special call out to the Inquirer for having media just before this to get everyone, making sure everyone's interested, and to the Councilwoman and Register of Wills for your constant oversight to get this on the priority agenda. As all of you are well versed in the topic of tangled titles, I expect the themes highlighted in the report and the ways people can fall into a tangled title without even realizing it, the cost and the complexity of remedying the problem, and the extent to which some parts of the city are more affected than others. Things that you all know and are directly affect either you at your work or you in other parts of your life. I would like to start by asking each of you to take a few minutes to talk about how you see those themes play out in your work. Let's start with you, Michael, to talk a little bit about how this affects your life and how you work with it.
Thank you so much, Secretary Richmond, and Councilmember Gilmore Richardson, and Madam Register, Commissioner Leonard, and everybody else. It's so fun to be on this panel to talk about a really, a difficult issue and such a significant issue. I want to talk just very quickly in terms of themes about, Secretary Richmond, you mentioned the complexity of the issue and maybe sort of an angle of the complexity that might not at least be obvious at first. And that is this: a lot of times people come to community legal services where I work because they're in crisis. Right? They're facing an eviction, or their water's been terminated, or they just lost their job, or their kids have been threatened to be taken away from them. Tangled titles is a different kind of crisis, though. Often it's a crisis that looms in the background and sort of like as a cloud over their lives, to say nothing of a cloud over their property, that is not sort of seen as a crisis until it hits at the end. And so one of the, and it blocks somebody from saving their house through a mortgage modification, or qualifies them for basic systems repair program, or any of the programs that that Garrett mentioned during his presentation. And so one of our challenges as folks who are helping homeowners in this space is, how do we focus attention on this very complex issue now in order to unlock this $1 billion of family wealth, instead of waiting for it to become an even larger issue later?
Thank you. That was just what we needed to hear. Next, Kelly, can you share your focus on why this is so important in your work?
Sure. I've been fortunate to be able to work on tangled title issues for the last 15 years, and it's, I have to say, really exciting to be part of a panel of folks, really esteemed folks here that are talking just about tangled title. It's not something I could have dreamed of 15 years ago. So with that in mind, I think something that really sticks out to me is the fact that time is really not our friend when it comes to resolving tangled title issues. The more time that passes before we can get someone in the door and help them resolve their title issue, or maybe even prevent their title issue, the harder it's going to be. And it really, it unfolds from there, that if we have one of those instances that Garrett was talking about, where someone is living in the family home and it was their mom who owned the home and passed away. If she passed away a year ago, we can probably work with that person to find, their siblings who might also be an heir, and try to figure out who in the family is going to take over that home. If it's been 5 years since mom has passed away, it gets more complicated, right? Someone else, one of the other heirs, has passed away since. They left kids of their own. Those kids move to Florida. We have to go track them down. And every year that passes, this problem gets a little bit more complicated. And that's one of the things that I'm most excited about, that I know we're going to be talking about today, and that everyone in the city is really focusing on going forward, is how do we make time our friend again? And how do we figure out how to get folks in the door, both to prevent these issues, but also to solve them far more quickly, so that we can preserve that intergenerational wealth that folks desperately need in the city.
Thanks, Kelly. That's so important. And one of the things we do need to remember is time is not our friend in this kind of process. Jim, Commissioner, let me call on you next.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I would agree with Mike and Kelly that, it is a looming problem that lurks in the background of thousands of people's lives. A lot of times we haven't provided enough education to folks in communities for them to understand just how big of a lurking problem it is. And we also, in the Recorder of Deeds office, just like I'm sure Madam Register does, I mean, I know Madam Register does, see people like Mike and Kelly do more often than not in these issues at a time of crisis. And the path to untangled title is incredibly complicated. And when we see them in our office, they more often than not are, trying to grapple with several systems, my office, the court system, and the Register of Wills office, that are incredibly hard for a layperson to access and understand. And access, I mean, in terms of sort of getting through the processes, which are really very legal in nature. And, folks more often than not appear in the Recorder of Deeds office, and, some years ago, or more often than not years ago, a parent died, there's a crisis, whether it's a need for a mortgage reformation or other looming crisis. And they sort of show up at the Recorder of Deeds office, and they genuinely believe that they can come in and we can change the name on their deed. And they say, my mom died and I need you to change the name on your records. And sort of almost, it's sad because they feel like we can just sort of key it in and it's done, only to learn that, it's going to be a much harder and more expensive road. And ultimately, they make their way, hopefully, if they can access it, to folks like Philly VIP or CLS.
Thank you, Commissioner. That education process is so important. Next, Madam Register. First, I want to thank you for all the publicity you've brought to this recently, and want to hear more about why this is so important for you at this point in time.
So, thank you. Coming from you, Ms. Richmond, I feel honored. Sophia, thanks for being a gracious host. Garrett, that was a really nice PowerPoint presentation. I just can't believe it. Just a year ago, I called a meeting with Pew Charitable Trusts, very concerned about the issue of tangled titles, because I had learned about it from reading a report that Pew put out a couple years ago, and I had also read the report that Philadelphia VIP put out. And after getting a lot of coaching from this whole legal community, I was like, we have a problem here in Philadelphia. And sure enough, a couple of weeks ago, I attend a Register of Wills conference, and I started talking about tangled titles, and all the counties was like, tangled what? They didn't even know that tangled titles exist, because estate planning is not a problem in those other counties. And being one of the first original cities in this country, for us to have gotten to this point where we don't understand how to transfer our wealth and pass down our generational wealth is very tragic. And with this study is so pivotal, because I asked the Pew Trust, could you show me where they at? Where are these tangled titles? And when that map was released a couple of weeks ago, it was like unbelievable that the concentration where that map is, or where those tangled titles which are everywhere. So even when other areas think it's not a problem for them, as a block captain for over 25 years, one house can really tear down a block. One house could make a difference on a block. And so what I see every day in my office is when people come in and the fighting, it's just so horrible because it really tears apart bloodline. Simply, if someone would have wrote a will, something as simple as that, that's the information that I know we all need to take away from this, because yes, we have a pandemic of Tangled Titles. We know where they are. We know the problems that they're causing. And now we have a chance to really change history. And in order for us to do that, if you look at all those stats and listen to Kelly and them, is we're going to have to get some money to help these people. And so this is, this is just something that I'm grateful that is on the forefront of conversation.
Thank you, and thank you for making sure it stays on that forefront of information. Councilwoman, I left you for last because you have also taken a very visible role on this in making sure your colleagues understand how important this needs to be on the table. And you've actually gotten it to be a priority on that table. So thank you so much in the names of so many people for whom this is a critical issue. But also, you have shared, and the Pew report quotes many people who have spoken about previous experiences with Tangled Title. So we really would like to hear from you not only why it's so important, but some of your own experience with Tangled Titles, and listen to how it affects everyone who happens to be caught up in this kind of situation.
No, thank you so much, Estelle. And first, I want to thank you, Pew, for the extraordinary research you all conducted to really highlight the depth of the issue around Tangled Titles and deeds here in the city of Philadelphia. So Garrett, thank you so much for that presentation. And to all of my fellow panelists, I'm so honored to be here with each and every one of you. You all in your own right and in your own roles have done so much to keep this issue at the forefront of the agenda in Philadelphia. And that has been helpful to me as a member of Philadelphia City Council and advocating for the necessary revenue we need to help families who are dealing with this issue. And, as you all know, that as a member of City Council, our primary role is to work on policy. So really, this research has helped to inform the work that we are seeking to undertake in council. So we know, really where the issue is and all the individuals who need help. So from a personal perspective, I want to start and really share two different stories with you today. I started in city government as an intern and a volunteer, and that was 22 years ago this year. And my first paid role several years later was that of a constituent services representative. So, oftentimes we would receive calls from individuals who were seeking to, get assistance to fix up a house that they may have lived in. And we all know that Philadelphia is an old city and we have old infrastructure. And oftentimes when it was time to submit that documentation regarding the ownership of the property, those individuals would be unable to move forward in the process to receive whatever assistance they were requesting from the city. And I remember cases where, individuals have been paying taxes for years, and they just assume that because of that, they own the home or they have the right to apply for funding for the home. But that obviously was not the case. So as a young staffer, I was really sympathetic, but still didn't understand and grasp how awful being in a Tangled Title could be until it happened to me. So in council, we all know we go by terms. So every 4 years is a term. So 2 terms ago on tax day, my dad died. And my dad died without a will, but yet my mom was still alive. And the last year of that same term, my grandmom, who had lived with us since I was in high school, died. And then 8 short months later, the first council session of the new term, I remember it, it was a Thursday morning, that very first council session of the new term, my mom died. And, I remember just being completely devastated because over that, span, my sister and I, we lost our mother, father, and grandmother. And we really didn't know where to begin. So my sister and I, we, started to look for all the paperwork and just try to figure out exactly what was going on. And we were left with property that had 2 deceased people on the deeds, and both of them had mortgages, which made the situation much more complicated. And each of the mortgages were in the amount of at least 4 times the original mortgage amount. So we really didn't know where to begin. I'll say this is something that I know a lot of families face in this situation. We were paralyzed by fear, thinking that we could lose the properties that my parents left to us and that my mom asked us to save on her deathbed. She literally grabbed my hand and said, "Kathy, please, no matter what you do, you always need a place to say, please save the property." So, everything about the Tangled Title issue is very personal to me. And for me, I know that there are 10,000 other families at least who are out there dealing with this issue as well. And many of those families look like my family. So I recognize we all have to do everything we can to bring resolution for families so that we can preserve and help them preserve their generational legacy and wealth, and then also help families stay in homes. This is about, housing preservation and homelessness prevention as well. So I come to this issue both from a workforce perspective, but also from a personal perspective, knowing we must do all we can to help folks untangle tangled titles and deeds.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, and particularly the passion you bring to this. I feel that with the status of our panel and so much knowledge, that this time we'll not only get it on the agenda, we'll be able to accomplish and help people in real time. Before we dig in on additional policies or programs to address Tangled Title, let's talk a bit about what's in place currently. I'd like to start with our advocate panelists, Kelly and Michael, because one of the most striking data points in the Pew report was how much it cost. Over $9,000 to unwind a Tangled Title in the end, as we saw, in a pretty simple case. Of that total, close to $8,000 is in attorney fees and state inheritance tax. You both work for organizations that provide free legal services. Thank you so much to income eligible clients. So Kelly, we know that $9,000 is an estimate for a simple case, which is the exception rather than the rule. Can you talk to us a little bit about how things get complicated and how that adds to the cost and the effort we need to resolve the problem?
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that Garrett, really took the time to really think through and put in the report. And I encourage folks to go in and look at the table he has in the report to lay out that $9,000 estimate for a simple case, because it does really point out the issue that we're facing, that's for a simple case. That's where we've got, someone who's passed away who was probably the parent of the person who's trying to get title. They left maybe just a few kids. All of the kids are in touch with each other and they're all in agreement about who's going to take over a title to the property. That's a simple case. That can cost $9,000. So from there, the cost can only go up. And the ways in which it can get more complicated and the cost can grow is, in part based on time, like I mentioned earlier. The more time that's passed since that owner passed away, the more time it's going to take to track down all of the heirs, if they've since passed away, to track down who their heirs are, and to get them to sign the legal documents that are necessary to both allow the person who would be my client to actually open the estate of their parent who's passed away, and then to actually have a deed that's transferring title into their names. So there's cost involved with this, and there's the time spent in trying to find these family members and locate them. And then from there, it can grow more complicated because you may not find all of the folks who need to sign title over to you. You know, in the example I gave earlier, I said maybe a sibling has since passed away and their children, you know, they last lived in Florida with their children and their children were last known to live in Florida, but no one's been in touch with them in a while. We can't just take away their legal interest in the property just because they haven't been around, even if those heirs haven't been around for decades. The law really doesn't provide a way to take away the legal interest of someone just because they haven't shown a desire to come by the property to take care of the property. They still have a legal interest in the home. And so, you know, it takes a lot of time to really try and dig for them to see if someone can find them, trying all of the possible family members, the neighbors on the block. Has anyone seen them? And ultimately, if you can't find them, while you can't take away their interest in the property, you might still be able to become the administrator of, let's say, your mom's estate. But in order to do that, you actually have to file another petition, an extra petition with the Register of Wills, because you don't have the permission or the agreement of all of the other heirs to serve as administrator. And so the Register of Wills wants you to file an extra petition to explain that and to explain to them how you try to find those folks. All of this work, it adds time to the process and it adds cost because you're looking for those folks, you're filing extra petitions. And so a case that may have been resolved in 9 months with $9,000 can grow both in cost and in time. So that's, you know, I think one way to look at it and to really let it sink in how complicated this issue can be and how important it is that we're having this conversation to make sure we're really trying to get at the heart of those issues that are causing serious problems for so many of our community members.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for those remarks. Michael, I know from my experience as secretary that people find your door when they're in crisis or when there are so many overwhelming problems that they need that advocate attorney to help them work through it. But can you take us through some of the services that are available for your clients and help us understand how so much unmet need there is for legal assistance and how you help people in this particular situation?
Sure. And Secretary Richmond, I think you're right. I know you're right that the demand for legal representation always exceeds the number of clients that we can help. And sadly, we are in a position often where we need to talk with homeowners and explain, yes, you have a meritorious case. Yes, you have a right. Yes, there's something to do. But we don't have enough attorneys and paralegals to help you at the moment. You know, for years, CLS has prioritized helping clients with tangled titles as part of a larger crisis issue. So somebody was looking at the loss of their home at a sheriff's sale, or was, you know, the water was coming in through their roof, and so they were trying to qualify for a loan or a government program. And those were the only types of tangled title clients that we were able to prioritize and represent. This changed in about 2019 when CLS decided this is an important enough issue that we need to figure out a way to represent clients who have sort of like standalone tangled title issues now, before it gets to be a crisis later. As Kelly mentioned earlier, time is not on our side here. And so in 2019, we were able to do some additional hiring. We hired a wonderful paralegal named Dot Goldberger. We hired an attorney, Rachel Gallegos, to really spend a lot of their time just helping people with tangled titles. So how does CLS handle these tangled titles? Well, it really runs the gamut, and it can run, you know, it runs everything from just a straight up deed transfer, where you've got a willing record owner who's still alive and knowable, and they want to transfer the deed to their sort of grantee to the person. Those types of clients are not common, but they exist. And those types of situations, those simple cases don't exist. All the way up to where we're filing adverse possession, quiet title claims in Court of Common Pleas based on adverse possession, or we're filing petitions in orphans court, or we're opening 2 or more estates at Madam Register's office, or we're doing lots of things. And those types of clients can turn out to be 100 or more hours, and that's where I think a lot of these costs come from, where some homeowners are unable to, where community legal services is unable to represent the client, and they are trying to seek representation somewhere else. One of the really difficult things about tangled title cases, and I think it's something which I think Jim alluded to, or Commissioner Leonard alluded to earlier, is that you oftentimes don't know what's involved until you spend hours and hours and hours investigating. And I'll give you just one quick example. A homeowner came to us and she said that her deceased mother had passed. The home was in her mother's name, and that the mother had been married to a husband 40 years ago. The marriage hadn't worked, and the husband had left, and nobody had seen him since. And so we thought, this is going to be hard. We're going to have to try to figure out who is where is he, how to find him. And then I mentioned Dot Goldberger, the paralegal. She found him. He was in a nursing home in an adjacent state, and Dot got him on the phone, and he said, great to hear from you. I'd love to be able to help in any way that I can. And thought, I guess it's not going to be so hard. Maybe it'll be quite easy, actually. And so Dot prepared the deed and the other necessary documents, sent them to the husband, and sadly, he passed of COVID before he could sign the deeds. So then it got to be difficult again. And so you don't really know what's a client, whether it's going to be an easy case and only take a few hours, or whether it's just going to be an intractable case that's going to take 100 or more hours until you really sort of start representing the client. What we do at CLS, because we can't represent everybody who seeks our assistance, is we kind of have a band of clients that we can represent. If it's an easy case and the client is has the ability to do a lot on their own, we might just advise them or counsel them or refer them, out and say, this is what you need to do. But we're not going to have the resources to represent you. If it's a complicated case, where it's going to take a whole lot of work, and take a lot of, we think that's going to be a lot of complicated, then we might say, if we had another attorney, if we had another paralegal who could help you out, we might be able to represent you. But right now, we don't have the resources to do so. So that's kind of how we approach things. That's kind of how we sort of choose the clients that I know it's not fair, to clients. A lot of clients think it's not fair, but it's the best we can do when we have to sort of triage the clients that we can represent.
Thank you, Michael, for being so honest and clear in that, because it has to be such a hard process. One of the things we've heard from 3 of you is the importance of wills, and that's how that begins to ease the process in any way. And during Garrett's presentation, we heard about the probate deferral initiative, which Register of Wills Gordon launched and has partnered with Commissioner Leonard. You're also both focusing on educating the public about tangled titles, deed theft, and related issues. And you've teamed up recently for a great video describing the differences between your offices. We've put the link in the chat. So I would urge everyone to check the chat and to watch the video. Madam Register, we understand you've got not 1, but 2 video-based educational efforts underway. Plan, Prepare, Protect, a weekly web show featuring elected officials and community leaders, and the Register React series, which uses popular movies to drive home the importance of estate planning. We shared a link to the trailer for Register React at the start of the event, and we're reposting that in the chat now. It's just so important that people hear those messages. And we're eager to hear about your innovative outreach efforts, including who you're trying to reach, what your main message is, and how you're connecting with new audiences.
Yes, so my main message is simple. We have a tangled title crisis here in Philadelphia. We need to untangle these titles. The Pew study said that it's over 1 billion, that's a B, in dead Philadelphia capital here. And we know that's a very conservative estimate because we know it's more than 10,000. And they are creating such an obstacle with us being able to pass down generational wealth. You heard earlier in this presentation, 49% of Black people, who, by the way, the same report, we're the most people affected by these single titles, but 49% of us own our properties. And it's at jeopardy. We're at jeopardy each moment that on one term, what we didn't mention when we untangle the titles, these organizations are requiring that they make a will. So once we do untangle the title, you have to make a will. And so we're in danger on two folds. We're in danger in this city on the first fold is the lack of resources and funding, because $10,000, and with my probate deferment initiative where we defer the fees, that's nothing in comparison to how much the legal fees are going to cost. And attorneys, yes, we look for volunteers, but they have to feed their families as well. And one attorney and one paralegal, that's not going to put we need to fund. We need to thank you, Kathy. Well, they're proposing additional $7.6 million in the city budget. We are talking to state legislators to let them know about the crisis here in the city of Philadelphia. We send $80 to $100 million in estate taxes to the state of Pennsylvania on a yearly basis, and we're going to send that this year as well. And we really want to appeal to everybody to call these state legislators and support this initiative of Councilman Kathy Gilmore Richardson. We have to get some money. We have to get the money. And what I'm doing is getting this message out to people to say, hey, wake up, make a will. You don't make a will when you get old. You make a will when you get an asset. And then we have to get the message out to other people to say, you are in grave danger of losing your home. I want people to stay in their home. I want people to continue to transfer their generational wealth, hard-earned money. Our parents, our grandparents, and great-grandparents, they worked very hard for us to be able to have houses here in Philadelphia. And we have, I believe, as a registrar of wills, I have a social responsibility as an elected official to make sure people understand the rules around owning assets and how you transfer them in the state of Pennsylvania. And then we got to go back and help these people that unfortunately was ignorant, and we didn't educate them enough to teach them how to preserve their generational wealth so they can not only survive but thrive here in Philly.
And we're going to continue to repeat that theme. Commissioner Leonard, what outreach strategies has the records department found to be effective?
Well, I've been fortunate enough, first of all, to Secretary Richmond to be invited along many times at this point with Register Gordon to participate in her outreach efforts, and that's been a joy to me to be able to tap into her network, and along with now Councilmember Gilmore Richardson and some of her colleagues to help me spread the word on our end in the Recorder of Deeds office and the part we play on this. Separately, we've what we're doing, and one of the topics which is that I deal with a lot in our office, which is a sort of is a type of tangled title, but a crime, is deed fraud, where folks are forging deeds and stealing family homes right out from under the noses of heirs and family members. And if you look at the conditions that create tangled title and the locations where a lot of those tangled titles, we now know from Pew where they're located, you can see when I look back at our data on where we've received deed fraud reports in the last 7 years or 8 years that we've kept data on those, it's the same. You can overlay it right on the same communities. And the crime of deed theft, and everybody on this panel knows, is just this incredibly insidious crime to think that you could own a family home and it could have belonged to your parents for generations, and one day, you get a letter in the mail or somebody knocks on your door and they say they own the property, and lo and behold, there's a deed in our office that's forged, but nonetheless is on record that says you no longer own it, and again results in potentially a year or more in expensive litigation to fix. And what we've done there is to provide people with a website and tools on our website, our records department, Phil.gov website, on resources available for deed fraud and how to file a report with us, and also to be able to sign up for a free email notification alert service called Fraud Guard, where you can receive a notice and a link via email if a document's recorded on our office with your name on it, and you can click and look immediately. And that's very important because, as Kelly said, with respect to Tangled Title, time's not our friend, and it especially isn't with fraud. So the sooner folks can find out that may have happened and take action, the better. And then one of the things we have coming up that I'm really excited about is we've just awarded a contract to a public relations firm to help us during this fiscal year to develop what we've never done before in-house, which is a comprehensive public outreach engagement campaign on deed fraud, to get out into communities and really in a way that sort of a multi-point way to communicate and educate people. Because I think just like Tangled Title, that deed fraud's an issue that deserves that level of thoughtfulness and engagement. So we're excited about that.
Thanks a lot, Commissioner. And I noticed that Sophie has also just put in the chat a link to Fraud Guard. So I encourage people to check in on that one too. This is a question for anyone who wants it. The assistance programs we discussed within this Tangled Title are only available in many cases to those who either have relatively low incomes and who intend to live in the home. However, there are a lot of people who don't fit that criteria. A low-income person who wishes to sell the inherited house rather than live in it, a $10,000 for a simple untangling is still a lot of money, even for a middle-income person, and that's still at the very local level. And those middle-income folks often don't qualify for assistance, but they still can't afford to do it on their own. What are the options for people who don't fall into the easy categories, and are there policy changes that could help?
Well, if I could just jump in here quickly,
please.
Estelle, to just briefly talk about this. And I do agree, a lot of individuals may not qualify for any legal aid. I can say from personal experience in our situation, we paid for our attorney out of pocket. So I think we have to ensure that when we put these programs together, that there's a mechanism to also help families who may not be, very, very low income, but individuals who, may be, and I hear our majority leader saying this all the time, a penny over the qualification amount. We need to help those folks as well, because if you look at the map, a lot of the tangled titles and deeds are happening in our middle neighborhoods as well. So I do think we have to look into that around some of the additional policy changes we're making. But I wanted to also mention all the various grant programs that we have. We need to ensure that individuals are aware of those programs and the qualifications for each of the programs. But I do agree that we need to closely look at those programs to ensure as many families as possible qualify and are able to get assistance and aid.
Other responses?
And as you can see, excuse me, the bulk of the cost of the untangling of the title is, they're saying minimum, what, $6,000 to $10,000. I don't know many middle income people that can even afford to pay that much to an attorney to do the research in the background. So if you're looking at it, it's not even just, supporting low income. We want to just support families. And so maybe, we can talk to the state. I mean, after all, I don't keep repeating, we send $80 to $100 million to the state every year, and inheritance and state taxes every year for nothing. We need some reinvestment back. It's going to make the state more money. It's going to make the city more money. It's going to free up that $1 billion plus of dead capital. I mean, this is a humanitarian type of situation going on. Even if we might have to bring this up to the federal government to say, hey, we got Black people, who, of course, we've deserved reparations from, our enslavement here. We have 10,000 houses in a concentrated area of Black people, Black families at risk of losing their homes and being displaced, not able to sell their homes, not able to get insurance to protect their house or nor their neighbors. And the big issue is getting the money, or one of the issues is, first of all, we need to let them know they're in Tangled Titles, because like Jim just said, people come up to him saying, my mom died here, put my name on it. They don't even know the process. So it's just the resources. That's where I would say the resources to help all these families, whether you're low income or middle income. That would be my answer.
And I think you've mentioned a couple of times, and it's so important that you and all of us need the resources to help people with this. And if we're going to help maintain the Black ownership of homes, which is highest in Philadelphia among largest cities, then we need to help make sure people understand and are educated. And all of you, I see, have some stake in that education. Let's talk a little bit about what comes next. Councilwoman, what would you like to see the city start doing, or what should they do more of as we look at this? And I'm going to put all three questions out there. Michael, can you comment on the state level reform agenda? And Kelly, what changes in court policy would really make a difference?
So I think for me, I'd like to see all of us look at this issue for what it really is, for all the areas of impact and for the individuals and the families who are most often being impacted by this issue. This is a home ownership preservation issue here in the city of Philadelphia. You heard the stats around home ownership as it relates to the 50 other cities. This is a generational legacy and wealth issue. It's a houseless prevention issue. And certainly, after seeing the data, it's clear this is a racial justice issue. So we know that our city is rapidly changing, and it's up to us to do everything that we can for those 10,000 families who, like my family, suffered in silence because of this issue. So this session, I co-introduced a resolution with my colleague and the chair of the Housing Committee, Councilmember Gaudier, authorizing the Housing Committee to hold hearings on the impact of Tangled Titles here in our city. And while we were doing this and in preparation for this panel, I did some research in our legislative tracking system to see when was the first time Tangled Titles was actually mentioned in our legislative tracking system. And I found a bill from 2013 from former Councilmember Bill Greenlee, who we know was a people champion and just a wonderful member of City Council. So that was the first time I could find it. And out of the 12 bills and or resolutions or budget bills that came up that mentioned Tangled Titles in any kind of way, 7 of them have been presented in the past year and a half. with the last three being a part of the legislation that I've introduced. So because of the work of all of the panelists and everyone here and the research from Pew, I know that this issue is definitely picking up steam. I have to give kudos to our council president for his Neighborhood Preservation Initiative, NPI, which will provide an additional $7.6 million to help families resolve tangled title or deeds in the form of grants, not loans, grants that you would not be responsible for paying back. And that would be around $1.9 million each year over the next 4 years. So I think that will definitely help. I know that there's been an increase for some of our legal aid organizations from the Housing Trust Fund specifically for this issue. And then I'm also working on a bill and have been meeting with our funeral home directors to give an information sheet to families when they receive the death certificate of their loved one. And we're finally working on legislation with revenue and law to research any potential programs to help individuals who may be suffering with the tangled title or deed, or need to resolve a tangled title or deed, and they may owe back taxes. And we know we have the UPA program and LOOP, but tangled titles are a very specific situation that impacts about 10,000 households. And we know, based on the research from Pew, that a little less than half of those folks, or around half of those folks, have been in this situation for 10 plus years. So at some point, they may or may not be able to prove equitable ownership based on the definitions from the state. So I think we have a number of things going on, and I'm looking forward to working on this issue.
Thank you, and thank you for the work you and the council president are continuing to do. Michael?
Sure. Very quickly, on the state level, I think Councilmember Gilmore Richardson is absolutely correct. This is a racial justice issue. Here at CLS, 84% of our tangled title clients are Black, 15% are Hispanic or Latinx, and there are some things that the state can do to address this. The state can reevaluate the inheritance tax. Should families who inherit a modest family row home be subject to the same inheritance tax rate as somebody who inherits a mansion? Number two, the state could take another look at the DHS Medicaid estate recovery program. A lot of families are really nervous about raising their loved one's estate because they're worried that the welfare office, sorry, Secretary Richmond, with all due respect to the welfare office, they're worried the welfare office is going to come after them. And we need to make sure that there are clear rules around estate recovery and a flexible waiver process so that intergenerational family homes are not ripped away. And number three, Register Gordon has really led the way with the probate deferral initiative, reducing the barriers for low-income heirs to probate their estates. We, years ago, and we've heard so often that families would, they'd cobble together the money to give their loved one a proper burial. Then they go to the Register of Wills office and they'd be told $500, around $450 or more to probate, and they'd walk away, and they would not do that. Things are changing now, and there's no reason why the state should not be supporting Register Gordon's initiative and making sure that other Register of Wills offices across the Commonwealth also adopt similar deferral or waiver processes for those fees.
Thank you. And again, thank you for the support of Register of Wills. We need that state support. Kelly.
So on court policy, this is actually the area where I think we don't have quite as much work to do. Most of the tangled title cases that we see really don't end up in the courts, right? They may, at the farthest they usually get is really going into the Register of Wills, which is not a court, it is an agency. And the cases that most likely might go into court are quiet title actions. If you have a rent-to-own agreement, if you're the victim of a forged deed, if you have an adverse possession claim, and those cases do go into the court. But I have to really give the First Judicial District a lot of credit here. They have really spent a lot of time and energy over the years, particularly under now President Judge Edie Fox, but even before she was President Judge, she really took this on as a really important issue and has spent a lot of time talking with the private bar, talking with the public interest bar to figure out how do the judges really navigate the tricky terrain of trying to help clear these title issues without taking away the rights of someone who might actually want their legal interest in the property. And we really very much recognize at VIP that the judges are in a delicate position here because they are really trying to make sure that the right person ends up with title, which can be very challenging in some of these cases. So I really am extremely grateful, and I think we're really lucky in Philadelphia that we have a court system that is already very attuned to these issues. And what I would just say is that what I come back to more than court policy is so much of what we've talked about today, which is about education. It's the theme we keep talking about, right? Is we have to get people to do estate planning, and then we have to get people, when that person has passed away, to walk into the Register of Wills and to probate the estate, to have access to the legal assistance they need to when they're going through this. And I think those are things that we can do. And those are things that I think there is a lot of optimism for now that we're having the conversation that we're having. And that's really, I know that, education, we don't think of that as policy, but that really is so much of the policy that we need to be focusing on with this.
You're so right. And it's probably one of the most important things we can leave people to think about. Just before we turn it over and get to some of the questions from the audience, one final question for me. If you could either bust one myth about Tangled Titles, or if there's one thing you want people to remember about Tangled Titles, what would it be? And I think we've captured the big one, education. But along with education, is there another big thing you want people to remember? Commissioner, let's start with you.
I would say that you can't ignore it. It will be there. It will be there a week from now, a year from now, or 25 years from now. And even though everything's fine up until year 24, in year 25, you'll have a crisis and you'll have an overwhelming, it just as the council member alluded to, you sort of have this overwhelming issue, very technical issue confronting you at a time when you really least want anybody would want to have to deal with it.
Thank you. Madam Register, one thing that people may either break the myth or want people to remember.
The Tangled title is preventable.
Good.
Make a will.
Thank you. That sums it up. Councilwoman.
I would say don't be afraid to resolve the issue. Don't suffer in silence, and reach out to get the help you need to maintain your generational legacy and wealth.
Thank you. Michael.
I think in Philadelphia, we pride ourselves as being a city of homeowners, and a city of homeowners, not just for the wealthy, but a city of homeowners for people lower income, working class people, people of color. And that's why in Philadelphia, our sort of racial homeownership gap is a little bit narrower than it is nationwide. And Tangled Titles is an issue of racial justice, as the council member said. It's an issue about preserving these intergenerational Philadelphia family homes so that generations always have a safe haven to go back to. And it's a way of building wealth over generations to close the racial wealth gap.
Great. Kelly.
My myth busting is aimed at all the attorneys on the call and all of you who are friends with attorneys. There's a myth that you can only volunteer with VIP to help someone. If you are an expert estates practitioner and you've done this before, that is not true. The vast majority of volunteer attorneys who help our Tangled Title clients have never done this type of work before. And what we do at VIP is support them and make it possible. So we've worked with so many attorneys over the years who have, dove into this for the first time and we're able to actually help someone become a homeowner in the end. And it's really a powerful experience, and something that if you have a law license, you already know you have 90% of the skills you need to do this, and we can fill in the gaps for the other 10%. So please reach out to me and don't be shy. We will support you all along the way. So I'm sorry, it's a shameless plug for VIP, but volunteer attorneys are a crucial part of this, and I couldn't not mention it.
One of the things we've heard is that we need all the help we can get, and we need the money. But volunteers are always welcome, and please reach out to any of our members of our panel if you have the mechanism to help and to be there. Our first question from the audience is really more about this in terms of outreach efforts. What can we do differently as a city to connect with those families and households most at risk, but may not understand the need until it's too late? How do we start to actually decrease the overall number of tangled titles in the city?
Well, one of the things I think, particularly these nonprofit organizations that are assisting people, they should add a question on their application or process, and do you own a home? And they'll say yes or no, and say, is the name on your deed? Because do you own a home? To a lot of people is, yeah, this was my mom's home, so now it's my home. And so from there, if they say if they really don't own a home, then we can give them some information about getting that title or transferring that deed in their name.
And
I think
that's
also,
great. Go ahead, Councilwoman, please.
Apologies, Estelle. I think it's a lot of education and information and outreach. And, with this Pew report, I think it'll really help us to hone in on those 10,000 plus families. We have the information broken down by council district, which is always very, very helpful. I know that a number of my colleagues, particularly our district colleagues, have indicated their willingness to reach out to those families directly to inform them of all of the programs and opportunities for assistance that currently exist, because some folks just don't know what's available to them in their situation, and really individuals and families are suffering in silence. So I think having the information has been powerful for all of us, and now it's up to us in our positions of leadership and responsibility to reach out to those families with this information. And, prevention will be the key. We have to encourage individuals to get wills. I mean, that stat where about only 20% of folks with wills are African American, it breaks my heart, because once you have anything, you should have a will. So education will be key to us getting out the word around these programs and what folks need to do to untangle these tangled titles.
So important. Then we have a couple of legal questions. Michael, is there a risk from predatory buyers like the folks we hear advertise, we buy homes now and quickly? Do we have a risk of predatory buyers coming into our market?
Yes. Short version is yes. Boy, this is a whole nother webinar. Can I do this? Can I say, if folks that are more interested in these equity stripping schemes, these We Buy Houses schemes, you can find more information at our website, clsphila.org/home-scams, and you can learn more about your rights with these folks and how they interact with Tangled Title. But if I could just give 30 seconds, because I think what Register Gordon said a moment ago about sort of screening existing clients for Tangled Title issues is really important. At CLS, we've done the numbers, and about 26% of our clients own their own homes, and 47% of our clients age 60 and above own their own homes. And so one of the things that we would love to do, and we've been thinking a lot about how to operationalize it and how to find the resources to do this, is what if we could screen, if you come to CLS with an SSI issue, we'll ask you about a will. We come to do this, we ask you about your will. But that's one of our sort of our goals in the medium to long term. But the other thing is the education piece. Register Gordon, if you don't do it, I'm going to do it. You should subscribe to all the Register's social media accounts. I'm going to post the Facebook account in the chat. The videos, the tweets, the Instagrams that are just extraordinary, and I don't know if any other Register wills, it's certainly none in Pennsylvania and perhaps in the country, are doing that kind of outreach around the need to plan, prepare, and protect.
And just a quick plug. Just a quick plug. It's hashtag PHLROW. We are on all social media mediums. Facebook, TikTok, Instagram.
We got the link.
You got the link. Thank you. Good. Thank you.
And Michael, we have the other link in the chat.
Thank you, Michael.
Sophie is right.